Hey everybody, it's Julie Ebersol for Ellen Hutson, and today I'm going to be playing with embossing paste. I'm going to be working primarily with the Studio 490 by Wendy Vecchi. I have some stencils and some palette knives I'm also going to use. And Studio 490 also comes in, the embossing paste comes in white, black, and a translucent, which I didn't know you could get a clear finish with embossing paste, as well as metallic colors. And I have the metallic gold, but there's also a silver, which I bet is really pretty. And before you get started, you do want to have a pan of warm soapy water handy so that you can immediately toss your tools and your stencils in there after you apply the paste, because you don't want that stuff to dry onto your tools. It will dry and be almost impossible to get off, very difficult to clean completely off. So to get started, I've laid down my Flower Frenzy stencil, this is by Crafter's Workshop, onto a panel of Neenah Solar White, no, this is Natural White. And then I'm going to take the white paste, so it goes on white, and it will dry white. And the first mistake I made was loading the front side of my palette knife. You can see that it has an L-shaped angle to it, and that made it difficult to get the paste down. I should have applied it to the back side of my tool, and so you'll see me later on correct myself as I'm working with this stuff. And you want to work fairly quickly and get the cap back on there. This stuff has a lot of water or moisture in it, so it will start to warp the paper if you play around with it for too long. So work quickly. And there I lifted my stencil straight up. I got lucky here because I didn't have any removable tape holding that stencil in place. So I was very careful to lift it up straight up. And in hindsight now, you know, I've learned always put some tape down there to keep it anchored in place, or you'll end up ruining your wet embossing paste. So now I'm working with some craft. I wanted to see what kind of finish I would get with the white on craft. I'd set the other piece aside to dry. It'll take about 25-30 minutes, and then I'm moving on. So now I'm spreading this out again. This time I loaded the palette knife correctly, and I learned to keep the knife flat against the stencil as I was spreading things out. And instead of angling it to the sharp edge to kind of scrape off the excess, and I got a much better finish. And here I just wanted to fade out. I didn't want complete coverage, so I'm just kind of letting it fade out towards the edges there. And then I'll lift up that stencil very carefully, and there you can see how it looks there with the fade out effect. And when it dries, the finish or texture is actually a little bit flexible and somewhat spongy. I thought it would be rock hard, so I was kind of surprised at that. I thought it'd be more like plaster. So it's just a little bit different texture. And I wanted to see if I could get a resist effect on the first piece that I did to make it show up a little bit more. So I took some Mr. Huey's and I spritzed that onto the panel and in my box there. And then I took it over to my Teflon sheet so I could try to like blot away the excess. So I've got a clean paper towel there that I'm just tapping against the surface to blot up the excess. And I actually got a really good resist effect with it. And I could have let it dry there thoroughly on the embossing paste and it would have tinted that pattern, but that's not the effect I was going for. So went ahead and blotted it off, and it's really a cool look. I think it gives a nice contrast and really shows off that relief pattern quite well. And there's what it looks like when it's completely dry. And that'll be fun to make a finished card with. You'll see that later on in the video. And now I'm moving on to the metallic, and I'm working with the Wallflowers stencil by Claudine Helmuth, and this is white linen cardstock, a little bit heavier. And I found that I really liked working with the heavier cardstock because I tend to dawdle when I'm doing this or overwork it. And there you can see when I used the sharp edge, I scraped away more than I should have. And it was very interesting to see that this embossing paste goes on a little creamier. It's just a little creamier and pearlescent, and it actually looks more like caramel pudding. So I was kind of worried. I was like, I don't know if this is going to look so pretty, but you'll have to wait to see when it's dry what you're going to get. So I forged ahead and removed my stencil and set it aside to dry. And here you'll see when it's dry, it's very hard and it has a gorgeous, lustrous gold finish, just beautiful. So the next thing I wanted to try was to cut my own stencil, and this is the Sizzix Magnetic Heart. And I took some of that 6x6 stencil plastic and cut it down to size to make a small heart-shaped stencil. And I also took the gorgeous Chrysanthemum stencil by Hero Arts. This is just stunning. And ran that through my Big Shot and just removed the chads there, and it will be ready to go. And the first step to doing the double stenciled effect is to take your solid shape and lay that down onto your project. So I've got that down, and I wanted to fill it in with color. So the tape is going to keep it from shifting around while I take that sponge dauber and load it up with some Memento Ladybug dye ink and get it all sponged in nice and solid there. And then I'm going to lift up that stencil, and I need to clean it off before the next step. So I just used a baby wipe, but you could take it to the tap and, you know, just rinse it out. And then take a paper towel or a lint-free cloth and just make sure that it is thoroughly dry before you move on to the next step. And that is to take the stencil and put it back in place over what you originally colored in there. And I'm going to use some Post-it tape again to keep it in place because I do not want it to shift, because I want everything to be contained. This is going to work as a mortise mask or reverse mask for me. And now I've taken the chrysanthemum stencil that I made, and I'm just going to rotate it till I have a pleasing, you know, it looks where, you know, the pattern is going to really create a pleasing effect there on the heart. And then I need to anchor this down really well. So I'm going to use quite a bit of removable tape here. And I started at the bottom, and then I'm moving counterclockwise in order. So I'm just going to go around the perimeter in order. And the reason I'm doing this, you'll see later on when I remove it why it's a good idea to do this. But also additionally, I'm doing it because I want to make sure that this stencil is anchored completely flat to the surface. Now, when I ran it through the Big Shot, it kind of warped the plastic a little bit, and so it was lifting up in different areas. And I want to make sure that I don't have any of that stencil lifting up from the surface, because I don't want the embossing paste to slip underneath the pattern and not get a crisp embossing effect. So now that I've got it all anchored down, I'm going to take the paste and go across the top of the whole thing. And it's not going to look real pretty right now. Like I said, you know, it's going to look kind of icky, but that Post-it tape is helping to anchor down the stencil, and it's also protecting what's underneath, the surfaces underneath. So now that we've got that done, we can take the excess off, get that into the jar. You should always recap your jar as soon as you're finished, just to keep it from drying out. That stuff will last you a long time, but you do need to make sure that you recap it. And now I'm taking off the removable tape in the opposite order of which I laid them down. And this helps keep that stencil in place without shifting. And I'm moving a little slowly here because I have a tendency to hurry because I'm so excited. I want to see what the end result is going to be. And that's usually when I make my big mistake and end up smudging something. So very carefully. And there you see that last piece. It serves as a hinge so I can lift that stencil straight up. And then I'm going to go ahead and remove the heart. And again, I'm working very carefully so that I don't disturb that wet paste. And there you can see that pattern is all contained within the heart there. And as it dries, it doesn't look all that great right now. It kind of looks all caramely and tan. But as it dries, you're going to see you've got this beautiful chrysanthemum effect in a gold, a lustered gold finish. And I also wanted to try it with the translucent. And when that got on there, you know, spread on there, it was very opaque and kind of white and milky looking. But as it dried, it became completely clear. And it took a little bit longer because I had a thick application, but whatever was underneath showed through. So I thought that was really a neat effect. That'll be fun to play with some more. And as my last project here, experiment, I wanted to use some Viva Decor Ferro. This is a metallic paint, a metallic finish paint. But it's not an embossing paste, but it actually works like an embossing paste. So I wanted to use a portion of this chunky chevron stencil. This is also by Crafters Workshop. And I already pre-spritzed some color onto a panel of, this is Bristol. I was going to watercolor, and then I changed my mind and decided to just mist it really quickly. And then I want to protect and mask off all those surfaces of that panel. So I'm just going to use some scratch paper. This is just additional paper just to make sure I've got all those gaps covered and nothing is going to get onto that panel anywhere else but where I want it. So again, just kind of protect everything else and just leave open that area you want to go ahead and fill with paste. So the Viva Decor, oh, see, I corrected myself, loaded the back side of the palette knife this time. The Viva Decor paint, the Ferro, is thicker than the Wendy Vecchi embossing paste. So it goes on pretty thick. It starts to dry a little bit faster, and it has kind of a a fine grit texture, kind of a sandy texture to it. And it's not as pretty when it goes down, but as it starts to dry, it really achieves that gold effect. And I did find I had to work a little bit faster with this stuff because it starts to set up and dry faster. It may take the same amount of time to dry, but I just noticed it started setting up faster. And you really want to make sure you get your tools into that pan of soapy water. This is even harder to clean off your stencils when it dries. Ask me how I know. So don't delay. And there you can see the finished effect. Isn't that awesome? It is really cool, and it's really hard. And it's hard to cut through. So you may want to pre-trim your panel if you're working with this particular stuff. But here you can see some finished examples. I have still shots in the newsletter that you can examine more closely to see the finished effect. I had a lot of fun. I can see myself using embossing paste quite a bit in the future. And I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. Thanks for watching.